It's all you, Sid.
Okay. Hey, everyone. My name is Sid, and I'm a software developer for almost 8 years. I did my undergrad in electronics in India, and then I worked in Hewlett-Packard in a city called Bengaluru, India, as a backend extraction, transformation, loading engineer. At this point in time, I was just working on backend Teradata scripts. Teradata is similar to Oracle, but for backend data warehouses. I did write code back then, but it was all Teradata. Like there was no Java, there was no fundamental foundation of computer science and software engineering. So I decided to pursue my master's in computer science, and then which I did at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. When I was doing my master's there, I got a couple of internship gigs at AOL and Amazon. And then I was lucky enough to get a full-time job at Amazon as a software developer. I worked there for 5 years. For the first 2.5 years, I worked as software. I worked on mobile shopping app for Android for 2.5 years. And then I worked on the payments team at Amazon for 2.5 years. After 5 years, one day my manager came to me and he said, "Hey, you got to start, concentrating on, your promotion to SDE3, which is a senior software engineer." And around during the time, I was planning on like creating this life things like, oh, I need to purchase a house and et cetera, et cetera. But the problem was I had a huge backlog of projects that I wanted to do. And after contemplating a lot, I eventually decided that if I don't complete the backlog of projects I had, I'm probably not going to be a happy man in a few years. So I quit my job to concentrate on my projects. And I started to check them off one by one. And right now I'm in my final project, which is the most ambitious one. And I'm seeing the finish line for the project. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And during this time, when I quit my job, one of my projects was to create a checklist app for hiking and camping. And I wanted to launch it to both App Store and Google Play. But I didn't have the necessary skills. I knew Android, but I also wanted something where I could launch it on all the platforms I wanted, mostly Apple App Store and Google Play. So I did a little bit of research, and I'm a backend engineer, mostly using Java. So once I started looking at Flutter, for me it was a no-brainer because I just felt right at home, because it just felt like I was using Java. And along with that, it gave me a chance to complete another project, which is to create a community. Around which time I created Flutter Vancouver. And then, started organizing events regularly for almost a year and a half. Unfortunately, I had to stop from the last month because the current project I'm working is taking up a lot of time. Is there a chat? Like, how do I send a chat message when I'm giving presentation? I'm not sure.
There is a chat box at the bottom. You should be able to see it.
But when you present it, it probably when you present it probably on the top somewhere.
Yeah, possibly.
Oh yeah, yes, you're right. Okay, I can see it now. So I just want to share some of the things I did with Flutter, so that you can have a look at it. And I also did a couple of other projects. One of them was creating ad blocker using Ruby. And I don't know why, it was just one of the things I wanted to do. So, but anyway, I did that and it was pretty interesting. So yeah, so if in the end, when you have Q&A, in addition to Flutter, feel free to ask me questions about like moving 3 different countries or 5 different cities. What is it like doing masters in computer science? How is it working at a company like Amazon, or quitting and starting your own gig, which is my favorite thing I did so far. So okay, without any further ado, let's get into Flutter. Okay, so you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
So Flutter falls under the cross-platform umbrella, and with so recently Flutter launched 2.0, and with 2.0, it supports more than 6+ platforms, which is iOS, Android, web, Windows, Mac, Linux. And the latest news is that Toyota is going to use Flutter for its in-house entertainment in its cars, which is pretty cool. So it's built by Google. It was launched in 2013 as Sky, and then for some reason they rebranded it as Flutter and launched it officially in 2017. It has grown incredibly since then. Flutter uses its own programming language called Dart, and in my opinion, if you're comfortable with Java or even JavaScript, you should feel right at home. And it has great support for event-driven programming, features, and streams. Unlike in JavaScript, where you have to like load a new library for that, but it also has null safety built in. By default, all the variables you define are null safe. That means they cannot be null. And if you want them to be null, you have to give a special syntax, which I'll show you later on. It has fast development thanks to Dart. It has something called as hot reload. If you're coming from React Native, you know something called as you have to install Expo to make changes on your code and then see the changes right away on your app. In Flutter, you don't have to do that. You can just use Dart has inbuilt support for hot reload. You don't have to install any third-party libraries to do any debugging or checking if your changes are being reflected as expected or not. You can also pre-compile your code to native code. So that means when you write a Flutter app, you don't need Dart anymore. It pre-compiles it to like native app. So you don't need any Dart engine anymore to run your app. And it has great dev tool support. And on top of that, it has fast-growing community. Flutter team goes one step ahead and marks some of the packages or third-party packages as Flutter favorite to let the community know that it's a particular third-party library is a top quality package, so that you don't have to worry about, oh, if this package is going to go out of date, it's not going to have any support, etc., etc. Yeah, and Flutter is known for its amazing documentation. So when you're stuck while working on your Flutter app or your Flutter web app, the first thing you want to look at is their documentation, because it's really good. It's one of the best documentation I have personally seen. So yeah, let's talk about Dart. I've dedicated a couple of slides for Dart. It's a complete programming language, just like JavaScript or Python. So if you go to Flutter Dart's landing page, which is dart.dev, they say that it's optimized for UI, which means that they have inbuilt support for event-driven programming, which is features and streams. It supports both just-in-time and ahead-of-time compilers. Flutter uses Dart's JIT for development, which enables it to do hot reloading or linking it to its development dev tools. And it uses ahead of time for deployment, where it pre-compiles all your Dart and Flutter code to like native code. which is different from React Native, which uses JavaScript bridge. And because of that, it has native performance and it's much faster than an app creating using React Native. Type safety, it supports both loose and strong typing. It's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. I personally love strong typing. I try to avoid loose typing as much as possible, unless I don't have another alternative. I always stick to strong typing. And yeah, it has null safety. You don't have to check if a particular variable is null or not, because by default, everything's not nullable. You have to go a step ahead to define something that should be nullable. It's event-driven programming. It has something called as futures. It's an asynchronous operation. For example, you can say, hey, get me this data from DynamoDB. You start a future, you wait for it. Once you get it, you just update the UI. And the future in Flutter just updates it automatically. You don't even have to call SetState. It does it implicitly. It has built-in stream support. That means you can create streams or a link to streams. And then when you get a new data, the UI is updated automatically again. It's again up to you. It does it via two keywords, async and await. Async represents an asynchronous function, and await only works within async context. When you use the await keyword, you say that, okay, I want to wait on this feature to be completed. It's helpful when you're waiting for something like authentication, right? You don't want to move ahead until you're completely authenticated. In that case, it's still a feature because you still have to go to the server and get the data, but you want to wait on that feature. So in that case, you use await. Here, let me show you an example. Let me see. Yeah. Opening up Dartpad, which is an online Dart editing tool that is maintained by Google. So this is you can does it look is the magnification okay, or do you need more? Okay, that's great. So this is so I want to show you a couple of examples here, which is event-driven programming and also null safety. We are not going to dive deep into null safety, just a simple example that showcases what it is. So the first thing Dart looks at is the main function. Main is the entry point in a Dart script. That's what it's going to first look at. And as you can see here, we have print our order message, which is pretty much says, hey, fetch user order, and then it waits on the order, and then it prints the order. We mark it as async. These are all features of Dart. I have not imported any library, which you have to do in another language like JavaScript. And then you just wait on that, and yeah, it's just a feature. I try to simulate a service call here, which is fetch user order. And I also have another stream, which is get numbers. All it does is it kind of sleeps for, okay, for every second, it just spits out a number. So if you can see in the console, the first thing we do is we fetch the user order, and then we fetch the numbers. And then, a better example will be do something else. So I think this is a much better example. Yeah, so you can see here, and Dart is a single thread event loop. So there's just a single thread. It's not multi-threaded. So you are on the UI thread, you're doing some activity, and then once you fetch the user order, it just fetches the user order, and then it keeps doing something else. So what it means is it only updates the UI is not blocked by any service call because it's a feature or it's a stream. So the main thread is always being used for whatever activity it needs. And when you get the data, the UI is automatically updated. Like, for example, you have seen here. And the other example I want to show is maybe, for example, authentication, right? And you can actually use a wait here, which actually waits for the user order to complete, and then it fetches the numbers. So there you go. It awaits the user order, and then it starts doing something else on the UI thread. So this is just an example of the single event loop thread and the features and streams. And also an example of how the UI, in this case, once you fetch the user order, you keep doing whatever you want, and you can show a spinner on the UI component, which shows the status of the UI order. And then once the data comes back, you can update the UI that, hey, the user order is complete. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. We also have a lot of time for questions in the end, so no worries. So this is the null safety. So you can see here, I defined a string I, and then when I'm trying to assign null to I, it says, hey, you cannot assign null to this string because by default, all strings, all variables by default are non-nullable. So you can catch these null issues during compile time. And also the editor will just tell you, hey, you're not supposed to, assign null value here. So the way so this helps because, as you know, we have a lot of issues because of null point. Like when I was working using Java, a lot of our issues were null pointer exceptions, right? Like everything. Oh yeah, this value is null, and you, oh yeah, this value is not supposed to be null. You find the root cause, and then you do your checking or whatever, and return maybe a default value, etc. So so you don't find those issues here because you're forced. The editor will tell you, hey, you're having a null value where you're not supposed to. In case if you want to assign a null value, you can. This is the syntax, which says that, yeah, okay, now you can assign a null value. This is nullable. And you can force something. So the other problem sometimes you might have is maybe say string, another string, and then you say, this is going to complain because I'm trying to assign a non-nullable value to a nullable value to a non-nullable value, and sometimes you have to do that. And the way you can force it is by like adding something called as banks. Sometimes, this is a simple case, but sometimes when you're writing methods, and then you have to pass in a non-nullable value there, you can use the bank to, if you know for sure it's not going to be null, you can force it to, you can force a non-nullable value to a nullable value to a non-nullable value. A lot of nullables here. But anyway, so that's a brief introduction to null safety in Dart. Any question regarding null safety in Dart? Okay, so let's talk about Flutter architecture. Now, I will also, as an example, show you React Native's architecture, just as an example. So this is something that I created. This architecture, this is not the official architecture. If you look at the official architecture diagram, you don't want to look at it. It's ugly. I don't like it. So in a default, it has 4 layers. So the first layer is the Flutter framework, and the second one is the canvas. And you can use all the components and the toolings and APIs that are provided by the Flutter framework to draw on this canvas. You can draw anything you want. And most of the reusable components are provided by the Flutter framework. But if you don't find something, you can create anything you want. And because you're not depending on the native framework for the UI components, you're depending on the Flutter framework. And if you don't find a particular, maybe you want a liquid kind of animation. Yeah, you can create that using Flutter. It provides you all the toolings. And then once you draw your UI and your state management and then business logic on this canvas, Skia engine will take care of transforming all that into the platform specific code, which is web, iOS, or Android. There's one thing, one catch here, which is you cannot invoke native views using Flutter. You can invoke native APIs like Bluetooth location, image pickers, etc., but you cannot use like a list view. You cannot use a native list view from like iOS or Android. You can create it using the toolings provided by Flutter framework. As I said, you get most of them, but unfortunately, because Flutter is a Google's project, the iOS widgets don't get so much love. But you can create them yourself. Like for example, for the checklist app that I created, one of my problems was back then it didn't have the search bar, the native search bar. I created my own native search bar using the Flutter toolings. So that's something interesting. So this is the official diagram from Google. As I said, one of the things is you cannot use native views, but it does provide you Material and Cupertino widgets, which are replicas of the native views that you get in iOS and Android. So it pretty much looks and feels like native, but yeah, but not really. It's all Flutter. It doesn't use any native views. And also its engine, which is Skia, which converts your Flutter canvas into the native code, is written in C and C++. And because of that, it generates very efficient platform-specific code. This is an example of how React Native does things under the hood. So it uses something called as JS Bridge. All your code is a JS bundle. And then when you're interacting with the UI, it sends the information, serializes as JSON, and the bridge takes it, deserializes into native, and the native UI will know, oh, I'm supposed to draw these native UI views here. So a lot goes on when you're using React Native, and that's why you get something called as jank in React Native apps, which is the animations are, there's a lot of flickering and then jerky animations. You don't find that often. It happens in Flutter, but not that often as in React Native. Yeah, everything is a widget in Flutter, and this statement is it's an understatement, like everything. For example, you have like 3 UI components, like maybe an icon, a button, and a text box. In web, you say, okay, hey, this is my CSS, I want flex, I want the direction to be vertical, right? But in Flutter, even flex and column, everything is a widget. I'll show you an example. It's just that the column widget doesn't draw anything on the UI, it just shapes it in a particular way. Yeah, so every UI component is called a widget in Flutter. Widget is similar to a component in React Native, and also much more. There are two kinds of widgets in Flutter: stateless and stateful. Stateless is optimized for anything that doesn't have any state in it. So there was this PM from Google who once came to our meetup. He said they found some performance enhancements when a particular widget didn't have any state. So that's why they created the stateless widget. And then you have the stateful widget where you can add the state. And the state management techniques is widely debated in the Flutter world. Like everybody gets really angry. They're like, no, I want to use MobX. I want to use Redux. You know, it's a war. It's like some of the discussions that go on. You know, like I personally use something called as provider. I saw that as, so for my first app, I used SetState a lot. All SetState does is you want to change a particular component. You call SetState to say, hey, I want to change this variable. And then you call SetState, it rebuilds the whole UI. While provider kind of, I'm trying to find the word here. So it provides you with separation of concern for changing the UI. You don't have to use SetState anymore. You can call something called as notify listeners within your methods. So for example, you want to change a particular state, you change the state and you call notify listeners when using provider. But if you're using SetState, you're like creating a new method and then putting all your business logic. And the code becomes really messy. It becomes spaghetti code if you use SetState. Yeah, let's look at a couple of examples. Let me show you a stateless example first, and then we will look at stateful. This is a stateless app. And so the first thing I'm telling, you can see here, I don't know if you remember, I told Dart first looks for a main method, and then in the main you call run app, which is Flutter's framework. And then in the run app, you call your widget, which is my app. And right now it's a stateless widget because I don't have any interactions here. And in this UI, as you can see, there is red, orange, and green. That's all I wanted here. And the way I built it is I said, I want a widget called column, and I want to pass 3 children to this column, you know, and it's like 3 containers, and all it says, okay, I want container red, orange, and green. If you're using CSS, it would be a completely different syntax, right? You would have one HTML, and then you would have probably CSS. And Flutter, it makes context switching. It takes context switching away. That's what I would want to say here, because it's just one syntax, and everything's provided by everything's one syntax, and it's all Dart. I think that's where I was going. I'll show you a similar example with React Native. So yeah, it's weird that you have to use Expo in React Native. So this is a similar code. Not sure why. I think they changed this. They probably added syntax highlighting here. You can see it's more like a web app here when you're using React Native. The container is more like CSS, and then you have more the angled brackets. I personally feel when I was doing research to which UI framework I want to use, this is one of the deterrent for me, because I did not know. I never worked with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript back then. And when I looked at Flutter's code, oh, there's just one syntax. I don't have to do a lot of context switching. So I picked Flutter for syntax is one of the main reasons too. This is without any state management. We'll look at an example of state management. Yeah, so you can see here. I'm not sure what's happening. Oh, there you go. I guess it took a while to load. So you can see here, I tap on the increment button and then kind of increment. And then this is, I probably didn't. Let's just, and then if you tap on decrement, it's a very simple example. I wanted to show you how SetState works and what happens when SetState is executed. So when I tap on increment, this piece of this particular code is executed. Trying to make it more readable here. Yeah, I don't have yeah, it's much readable here. The editor does whatever it wants to. I don't know how to properly, you know, write. Yeah, the syntax is all weird here. I don't want it to be in one line, but so anyway, when you have a material button here, this is a material button, and then when you tap on it, you say, hey, I define the counter variable here. And then initially it's 0, and you can see here I have a text widget which displays the value, the counter value. And when I tap on increment, the set state will redraw the whole build method. It just redraws the whole thing, and then all the new values are updated, and it reuses most of the components. And the only thing that gets updated is the text box, because that's the only widget that's using the counter variable. So it's actually really fast. I was having this discussion with Peter and Yuri before. This is one of the things we were discussing isn't the performance a problem, but it's not really a problem because it uses most of the widgets which are not impacted by the state change. And I want to show you how this looks in React Native. I personally don't have a lot of experience in React Native, so but I did a little bit of research. Yeah, I'll just use this one. Yeah, this is a similar. I think this might. Yeah. I might have to change this. Yeah, so there you go. You have to do it's the main thing I want you to see here is if you I want to talk about the syntax differences here. So you can see here in Flutter, you just say int 0, and then you don't say, oh, this is my state object. Everything that you define within this stateful widget you can change that using SetState to modify your state the way you want to. You're not using any special syntax to say that, oh, okay, this is my state. In React component, you have to say, okay, this is my state object. And then when you press on the button, then you call this .setState, and then you say, okay, this is my new state, which is the counter +1. So that's one of the main difference. And also you can see the syntax is quite different. Again, everything's that it's just single syntax. Like it's like just writing a Java, just Java code here. When you look at React Native, you have, it's similar to, again, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in my view. And one of the things is if you are from the web world, I think React Native is a really good choice. But if you're from, like me, from the Java world, you know, you will feel right at home with Flutter, because you don't have to learn anything new. It's all just the single syntax that you've been used to all the time. So any questions here? So whenever you're developing any product, the dev tools are very important to debug. It comes with Flutter comes with a really good tool chain to like debug, run your app. It has hot reload. For example, you change something, you tap on R, you quickly see the change, and then it has, for example, everything's hierarchy because everything is a widget. And everything is a hierarchy, like, okay, these widgets belong to this widget. And I'll show you an example. I have, the way I did that for Flutter Vancouver is I have a widget called screen, and then I would have the sub widgets for that so that we know, okay, this widget is actually a screen. And then you also have performance issues that you can debug using the Flutter Dev Tools. You can see here I put a screenshot, performance, CPU, profiler, memory, network. You can debug anything you want. So, which is a very important thing when you're developing apps. So I created this as what is the difference between Flutter versus React Native, but I guess you can also take this to Flutter versus HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all the other frameworks like Angular or Vue, etc. So React Native is more, or React JS, it's more inspired from the web world. Flutter is more inspired from Java and Android. React Native invokes native views. Flutter has its canvas, and it has its own views. It never uses the native views. That's one of the drawbacks of Flutter. If you want 100% native experience, Flutter is not the framework to use. React Native uses JavaScript bridge to communicate with native platforms. Flutter uses ahead of time to generate native code. So you don't need any dark like engine to run your app anymore because it's already pre-compiled the native code. It just, all you need is the OS, and OS recognizes, oh, this is an executable and runs it independently. And React Native is more mature. Flutter is new and growing, and we don't have to talk about web. Web is like, it's been there forever, right? And which is also one of its downfalls because it cannot get rid of all the different syntaxes, which I have a problem with, like HTML. I wish there was no CSS, but it's so you have to be backward compatible, and so that's one of the things with web. And scalability, because of SCIA engine, you can deploy a product to multiple platforms. Like you can write code once and then deploy. For example, you can create your Android and iOS app, and then you can just extend it to web just as a way to showcase or make just as quickly as a way to give access to your users over the web. But most of the times you still have to work on the responsiveness. Even if you have a single code base, you still have to say, oh, the width of the screen is small or medium and large. You still have to, and then you have to show the respective UI. And I'll show you an example of that, which Flutter Vancouver does. It's completely responsive. React Native can do that, but not out of the box. You have to depend on other libraries. This is just a popularity metrics that I grabbed from Google Trends. And as you can see here, Flutter is taking over right now. I would like to say they do a lot of marketing in countries like, I wouldn't say Africa as a country, African continent, India and China. They do a lot of marketing there. So I think that's one of the reasons. But I'll say that it's gaining a lot of popularity because once you get used to it, you can deploy apps very quickly because you can write one code base, and then all you have to do is create the native executables and launch those apps. You still, as I said, there is a little bit of learning curve, and you have to write some extra code. For example, okay, for medium, I want this styling. For for a large job on this styling. So as long as you're writing modular code, you can just mix and match the way you want. So who is using Flutter? Google, of course, Groupon, Tencent, and there are a lot of new, BMW recently launched their app using Flutter, and then Philips. If you use Philips Hue, their app is built in Flutter. Sonos, which I use, use Flutter. So yeah, let's look at showcase using Flutter Vancouver.ca. I think I want to show you. Sometimes my Mac gets stuck. As long as my Mac doesn't get stuck with because it's doing a lot of things right now. I want to show you how you can test your app on different screens, and also deploy it to which uses Dart just-in-time compiler. I also want to show you how it compiles to native code. So let's. Okay. So this is the Flutter Vancouver code, and everything is a widget here. Like I used an app bar. This is an app bar widget, and you can see here, and the animations you see here are pretty easy to create using Flutter. You get a lot of implicit animations as part of Flutter framework, and those are all you need. And in the app bar, I have a background PNG image with transparent background, and I added a gradient. And yeah, these are all text, and it's a row and a column, etc., etc. And yeah, and everything's like pretty. All of them are again widgets. This is a column. The mission, the text here, and you see. So it's like it's similar to saying that okay, I want to flex as a column, and then you have nested flex, which is you can have rows within those columns, etc., etc. So again, the code for all of this is open source. You can always go to about page and well, I kind of moved it to Flutter Canada, but once you go to Flutter Canada, you can get the code here. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll show you the code right now. So I want to show you the responsiveness. So you can see here, this is the large screen configuration that I have. But once I start, because Flutter rebuilds the widgets when the screen size changes. So everything is rebuilding, the state is changing. When your screen size is changing, the app is rebuilding itself. And then, yeah, it just changes, and everything becomes just a straight column compared to like if you change it. If you reduce the screen size, it becomes small, and it changes the configuration to a complete column, and then it switches to row if it's a large screen. Let's look at the code. So this is the code, and you can see here I have the above page and I have the home, and I configured that as screens because everything is a widget. It's up to you how you label your code. And to run the code, okay, let's look at, I don't know why I'm doing hit status. Okay, here are master. So let's do Flutter Run is like a debug command that quickly runs your code right away on the platform you want to run it to. So right now, I have Mac OS and Chrome. Let's say I have iOS simulator open. It will show the iOS simulator in the list of devices. And I'll also run the code in all three devices. that's the tooling when I talk about Flutter Run. There is also another way. Oh, it's automatically launching on iPhone. Okay, so I'll just show you on iPhone first, and then I'll show you on Mac, and then I'll show you how it works on web. One of the problems with web, it doesn't support hot reload. Hot reload is what changes when you, for example, you change something and then you change the name or a string and you press R, it immediately reflects on your debug device. That's called hot reload. But the problem is on web, it kind of rebuilds the whole app. They're still trying to integrate hot reload into web, but I'm not sure when that'll happen. But it's not that bad. It just rebuilds the whole app. You would have to like navigate yourself to the place where you made the change. I'll show that. I guess, okay, there you go. iPhone 12 is loading. So any questions? Maybe I can start answering them.
I do have a newbie question. So if you're compiling it to a platform, right? Let's say you compile it for iOS, for example, and people are using the app and there's a crash, probably you receive some debug information. How easy is it to debug? That's really the question, when there are issues.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You can see everything on your, so if you're using inbuilt VS Studio Code tooling, then you have something called as the output tab within the terminal. You can go to the output tab and it'll show you all the information. If you're using, like what I do, I manually run them like with the Flutter toolchain. It just shows you, okay, hey, there's an error. You probably missed, you did something you're not supposed to, and it'll give you the message. For example, I did something. The other day it showed me the error, and I was able to quickly fix it. And yeah, it's pretty good so far. I mean, like any software, like there might be some issues, and when you find an issue, like you just open an issue with Flutter GitHub, and then they will look into it, and they will and I think they've hired a third-party consultancy firm that is very responsive. When you file an issue, they're very quick with triaging it to maybe it's a severe or non-severe, or maybe a new feature, etc. So yeah, I mean, does it answer your question?
Not sure, because I'm thinking more. Again, pardon my ignorance in this area. If a user is using it on the phone, sort of like in production mode,
okay,
right?
Okay.
You don't have access to the development environment.
Yeah, you can. So what happens? You can use something. I personally, you can use AWS. AWS recently launched their own library. For example, let me pull that up real quick. What is it called? They don't call it AWS. They gave it some fancy name. I worked at Amazon. They love fancy names. They never use, they don't want you to find it by AWS. They want to use, what is it called? Like Amplify still? Yeah, they have, yeah, you can use it. Amplify, oh yeah, there you go, Amplify. Yeah, that's what they're called. I don't know if they have for logging the Crashlytics. So I use Firebase, and Firebase has something called as Crashlytics. And so, Firebase is Google's product, so they have pretty good integration with Flutter. And you can have something called as Crashlytics. And then you can use Crashlytics to get all the crash information from the users. So yes, yeah, you can. Yeah, for the dev tools, it's the information is very good. Like you can, if something you are doing something that you're not supposed to, you will get the information right away. And for the users, you can use Crashlytics, or you will have to do some research if AWS Amplify supports Crashlytics. I know they support storage. they support authentication. We recently had someone from solutions architect from AWS come and give a talk on Flutter Vancouver.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think they support like 3 things right now.
Awesome, thanks.
I would like to continue this question. Because Apple and Google, they collect a lot of data already about crashes, and they have huge library. How it looks like? Is it impossible to read, for example, source code, or like you can see some source code from like middleware? Did you use it for investigation?
I've never used it.
Yeah.
The farthest I've gone is, the user has a problem and I have a code that says, okay, log this error. Mm-hmm. And I've never used native components as much. You can use any native APIs you want, mm-hmm. Using Flutter, but I've not used any APIs with respect to crashes. So I have so this is running right now in the code I have. You can see here, oh, there you go. We're talking about crash and then it says, oh yeah, you messed up big time, like. So because I never checked this on mobile, like on mobile devices. So it's, yeah, you can see here, it says, okay, hey buddy, you did something you're not supposed to, and yeah, it tells you the file and it's this, okay, this is pretty cool. And if you have Crashlytics, you can actually log this using the Crashlytics API, and you'll have a dashboard, and you can see all these errors and who is getting from what location, etc. So I want to show you. So this is right now using Dart's just-in-time compiler. So let's say I want to change something. So maybe, yeah, so okay, I think this is much better than like changing a lot of screens. Okay. So, okay, let me see, what can I change? Okay, let me change the Flutter Vancouver. Go to home, child widgets, and then, okay, it's not here, so I guess it's in home. Yeah, I haven't looked at the code in a while, so I want to show you like the hot reload. I think oh, there you go. So let's say I want to change something to change, and then we don't see it, but it just says it's overflown. Okay, I can do this. So you change something, and then you just tap hot reload, and then you see it right away. So Flutter gives you this. It's really nice. I personally like it because I can make it, and you can change anything you want. It's just not, as long as it's not a static variable and a global variable, you can change anything you want. For example, you can add another text, and then you can say, like you can say, we galvanize talk, and then it just shows up, even though, so you can make any changes you want, including service callers, and then it kind of shows up. So that's one of the pretty amazing things about Flutter. And if you use React Native, you have to install a third-party app called Expo. And when I was doing the 2 examples to showcase the difference, I actually saw why am I even doing all this, like creating a new, installing Expo, and then logging in and creating accounts. So you don't have to do all that. So this is when you click on Flutter Run, it runs on, as I said, it uses just-in-time compiler, And the other thing I wanted to talk about was you get native feel, like all the scrolling, and it just looks like a native app. It doesn't look like a web view and then you just put in the web view here. It looks like an actual native app. And I want to do the same thing, but this time let's run it on web. Sorry. So you can run it on any device you want. So Flutter team recommends that you run this on Mac OS because it lets you run it on a native, run it as a native app. And also when you run it on a Mac OS app, you can do the resizing and check how the responsiveness of your app is. Yeah, it's just waiting for the debug connection to start, and then we'll just start up the Chrome. And this time, when you do any changes, the hot reload won't work because it's just not supported. It just rebuilds the whole app. And after that, I will show you how it converts the command. Like you just have to say, if you want to build production app, now you say Flutter build web. So it just gives you the web executable. It's just no longer a Dart executable at that point. You just run it as a like a web app. So and I'll show you that once it starts running. My Mac is old. It's 2013 Mac, and I bought this when I graduated in 2013. I thought, okay, I need to like give myself a gift, and I bought the most expensive Mac back then with the money I had from my internship. And it's still great. It's still great, but it suffers from especially if I'm using Zoom or Google Meet, it's just too slow. But it will start soon. Yeah, 2013 Mac. It's been a while, and I've heard that every Mac since then people had trouble. I never had any trouble with my Mac. They probably changed their business plan to be more painful so that people will buy again and again. Oh, there you go.
Keyboards are a big thing. Yeah.
So the keyboard I have is really great. I love it. But I've tried the new ones. I'm like, no, this is something I don't want to use. Okay, it's spinning up. Usually it's not this slow. It's just because I have too many things running right now. Okay, okay, there you go. So as you can see here, and you can see it says changed, right? Because we changed it. And then you can make a change. Okay, let's just. So it's done. And then when I try to do the hot reload here, it just rebuilds the whole app. It doesn't do the hot reload. So that's the problem with. And again, as I said, this is one of the things I wanted to show. And if you want to build so this is using just-in-time compiler, and you can use Flutter build web, and then now it builds a web executable. Dart use something called Dart2JS, and then now it's all JavaScript code. It does have some. You just have to go to the build folder and web, and then. So the way there's a pipeline that I've hooked up to my Flutter Vancouver code. So once I push the code to the main branch or the master branch, so Netlify gets a notification. Netlify will load Flutter, and then it will create a Flutter web executable, and then it kind of copies the CARS configuration, and then it then deploys the website. So you can see here compiling for the app has been done for web, and you can go to web here, and then it just gives you, you can see it in index.html. It has the Dart.js, which is Dart code, but in JS now. So yeah, you don't need Dart anymore here because it's all native executable code. So that's the showcase. These are some of the resources. As I said, one of the best resources to go to is flutter.dev. Pub.dev is where you find the third-party libraries. I forgot what's the one for JavaScript. The one used for Node.js, I forgot what it's called. But anyway, like you can find third-party libraries in pub.dev, and you have everything. You don't need to write anything new, and most of the licenses are MIT. So when it comes to licensing, you should be fine. But I would say as long as check if they're official libraries. If they're not, check if they're Flutter favorites. If they're not Flutter favorites, check the number of stars it has. Yeah, if it has less stars and people are not using it, I would not recommend using any third-party library that kind of goes outdated pretty soon. Yeah, these are some of the links I've put here. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Any questions?
May I ask one question?
Yeah, Keishi.
Thanks for great presentation. I'm just curious about the performance aspect of Flutter. So basically, I think you mentioned Flutter has a better performance compared to React Native, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever find any performance difference between Flutter implementation versus native implementation, like using Swift or Java or Kotlin?
So you cannot beat the native speed. That's the real deal. So if you can afford to have themes, one for iOS and one for Android, I think you should go for it. Somebody like me who's always working independently, right? Flutter is like a godsend for me. I can write one code base and then launch it to different
yeah, that's awesome.
platforms. You still have to do a little bit of work, but once you write very modular code, yeah, you should have no problems with mixing and matching based on the screen size. Yeah, so when it comes to performance, it's really good. I actually shared the link checklist.app. Don't use that as an example. So there is one example I want to give. So I think iOS changed its graphic engine from OpenGL to Metal API. I don't know the exact details, but they did that switch when they rendered their graphics. And so Flutter did that. They started, okay, they changed their engine. So let's Flutter also should use Metal API. And then it introduced crazy jack on iOS devices. On Android, it's amazing. It's always good. It's perfect, right? But so you can run into the problems because Google cannot. They don't know what iOS is up to, right? iOS is going to do their changes like nobody's business. So, and then yeah, Flutter can get into trouble. It's just not Flutter. Even React Native or any cross-platform API can get into trouble. So.
That's so great. Yeah, I was actually wanted to ask about your experience about yeah, handling some performance issues. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So yeah, for me it's been great. Right now I'm working on an app which I personally think is quite complicated, and I've actually started using global state for I stopped using SetState and started using global state, which kind of rebuilds the whole thing. Because when you change the global state, it rebuilds the whole chain from the main to everything that's underneath it. But even then, the performance is pretty good. I don't see any problem with it. So because it reuses everything that has not changed. So yeah, performance wise, okay, I do want to talk about Flutter web performance. So do not use Flutter web for like landing pages or static pages, or where SEO is heavy. You should not use Flutter for those, because everything is JavaScript when you use Flutter. It just uses Doc2JS and everything is just JavaScript code. And it has a load time which is maybe like a second or second and a half, which is really bad for web pages. Web pages are supposed to be really fast, especially landing pages, right? So the recommendation is for landing pages or blogs, have your own, maybe use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, maybe with Bootstrap. And then for your app, just link your login page or your app to your app written in Flutter. Just extend your native platform app to web, and then just link it to the login page. So that is the recommended way. I have actually done that, and it's pretty good. As I said, like, make sure it's responsive. And as long as you make it responsive, the way I did it, I have a widget, and the widget checks, okay, the screen width is medium, and then it just returns the screen it wants. So overall, when you look at the app, it just says, okay, this is a home screen, but underneath it checks, okay, this is 600 pixel wide, so I'm gonna draw this particular version. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Yeah, that was really helpful.
Yeah, no worries, Keshi. I think I saw you during the other.
I think maybe I'm not sure it was in this meetup, but yeah, I remember you gave like Flutter introduction presentation before.
I remember. Still, React Dojo. I saw you on React Dojo.
React Dojo. Yeah, but still, I was able to get new information out this.
Yeah, the reason I remember is because you kept asking me about the build method and SetState and why it keeps rebuilding. It's pretty cool to see you again here.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool for me too.
Any other questions? Awesome. Let's wrap it up. Just one small note. First of all, thanks Sid again for the great presentation. I learned a lot myself. I'm not familiar with these technologies. And second, we have more talks lined up. So August will not see any talk. So we'll give, we'll go enjoy the summer. But Peter is going to talk to us on September 2nd about DynamoDB. October 14th, we have Mike, who's going to talk to us about AWS Step Functions. And yeah, we have one scheduled for November, but without a date yet, probably in the beginning. Harman will talk to us about testing serverless services. So this a continuation a bit on the serverless topic. I'll post the links right here, not links, like the schedule right here, but I'll follow up, of course, through meetup.com as well. Otherwise, thank you all for attending, and yeah, we'll see you in September.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity. Really
You're welcome.
Excited, and I was actually planning on giving more talks within Flutter Vancouver, but yeah, this is going to be my last talk for the year, and
okay.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity. Thank you so much. James, Yuri, was great to catch up with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you.